Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. We would like to welcome you all, that is our viewers, to Ashnik's YouTube channel and to a very, very special episode. I am Rituraj, your host for today. Today, we have an exciting interview lined up to discuss the current and emerging trends of open source. We will be diving deep into the insights and findings from the survey on open source 23-24 conducted by the leading open source services and solutions provider, Ashnik. Let me begin by introducing our guest for today, who is not only a seasoned marketing veteran, but also an expert in the exciting world of open source. We are thrilled to have her on this episode today. Please join me in welcoming DILIP, who heads the marketing function and is the Director of Marketing and Strategy for India and Southeast Asia at Ashnik. DEEPTI is a battle-hardened professional in the open source ecosystem, having been associated with the industry for more than a decade now. Recently, she has also been recognized as one of the top 10 marketeers in Asia by the prestigious CEO Insights magazine. At this, I cannot keep quiet but only say, wow, that is some achievement. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming DEEPTI. Hi, DEEPTI. Welcome to this episode on open source surveys, trends, and insights. Hope you are doing well.
Thank you, Rituraj. Yes, I'm very well, and I'm hoping you're doing good as well.
Yes, I'm doing well, DEEPTI. Thank you for
That
asking.
was quite an introduction, but simply I'm just looking at marketing at Ashnik. Let's put it that way.
Sure, certainly. Now, may I request you to, since you have a plethora of experience in not only marketing, but also in this world of open source. So may I request you to share your unique perspectives about the open source universe through the recently published open source survey by Ashnik. I'm sure your expertise and insights will undoubtedly provide our viewers with invaluable knowledge and inspiration. So over to you.
Sure. So we do the open source survey. Ashnik does this every year. This is an annual tradition for us. And the idea behind doing this is to sort of get an understanding and, sort of insight into what are the upcoming trends, what are the newer technologies, what's hot with our customers, with our prospects. And this sort of gives us a sense of also what's happening in the region, which is why we sort of talk to a few, seasoned professionals and get their views, because then their opinions really matter to us, of course. So through this survey, of course, the idea here is to bring about, so the State of Open Source Survey 23-24 typically aims to provide a comprehensive analysis, of the emerging trends in the open source space, landscape, and the technologies. So we talk to a diverse range of individuals, whether they are technology enthusiasts, C-level decision makers, managers, IT heads, DX heads, and so on and so forth, and gather their views and opinions and insights in the sense of what is the new thing and what is the future of open source and where it is headed. We try also and cover a lot of geographies. It is sort of, we talk to people in Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, India, APAC, across APAC, and we do have a few participants also from the US, but it is typically within this region, and that's why I think it's special, because a lot of the surveys I notice for open source specifically don't cater to just this market, they cater globally. And I guess with this survey, we are able to bring more narrowed and more directed, inputs, which is for this region, which makes sense for this region. I guess that's why this survey becomes a little more interesting and, is definitely looked up by a lot of the people in the industry. They go through it and we get a lot of reviews and responses in the sense of how they find some of the statistics and insights extremely useful and knowledgeable.
That was really an interesting perspective on the open source survey and its objectives. Thank you. Now, could you help us understand some of the key findings from the survey? Were there any highlights or interesting trends that you would like to point out?
Oh, there are so many, there are so many, absolutely. Of course, one thing we definitely notice is the continued growth of open source. Year after year, we all know that open source, it came from a place where there was a lot of worry in using open source, security concerns, a decade back or so, and today where it is at, where there is a pull market for it, and there is a demand to, implement those in enterprises. So the open source itself has sort of transcended to what it's to where it is today. And the survey is very reflective of that. If you look at the survey, it does show that a massive number of enterprises today are dabbling with open source, are seasoned in using open source, and so on and so forth. So it is interesting. I mean, one has to see the survey to sort of take a look at more detailed statistics. But that's one amazing observation I've had. Uh, Besides that, I feel like one thing the survey also reflected is organizations are looking at open source technologies or solutions to drive innovation and to enhance security, which is quite amazing. I mean, that's a new one for us because we've always heard of open source being associated to cost and cost cutting and being more cost efficient on the pockets and saving IT budgets. But this association has been interesting to know that it's gone beyond just reduction of cost, but it's actually to get more agile systems, get more innovative systems, and much more higher, like in terms of security, building better security applications, secured applications at their end. So that's an interesting observation also, which, the survey also talks of and, has, shown to us. Besides that, I mean, open source is obviously collaborative. It is, it is a community. It's a community involvement. Teams get to sort of, work with at a very different, level in that sense. And I guess that is something also which is so on top and so important today for enterprises. There are open source, program offices which are set up in enterprises, and that's something that also came up in the survey. It was interesting to know that it was just a talked about idea maybe a year or two back, but a lot of companies today are implementing it, and some have already implemented it just to ensure that they are able to adopt open source the right way, in the right sense. And I think that was also something very interesting, and I saw the survey also talked about it. Besides that, of course, we'll have to look. Obviously, we cannot not look at the DX initiatives that open source surveys today supporting or pillaring, like whether it's the database space, whether it's emerging technologies, whether they're talking of AI, ML, unified observability, data pipeline, analytics, or just overall data management. Across all of these initiatives for customers today, open source plays an extremely important role. And that's another observation which was interesting because it was something that a lot of the participants put forward, when through their votes and choices of answers.
Right, right. I'm sure these perspectives and insights, a lot of our viewers, especially our open source viewers, will find it very valuable for them. Okay. Also, I mean, through this survey, do you foresee any kind of challenges in the adoption, or rather quick adoption of open source by enterprises today?
As you can see in this survey, while open source ecosystems are largely growing, but there are also some very commonly observed challenges that enterprises today are seeing or facing when it comes to accelerating the usage of open source, right? And while we just a while back, like I addressed how security is one of the most highlights of a bigger highlight by using open source that they want to achieve, it still is a concern for a lot of organizations. And the survey, in the survey, you'll notice that that's one of the highest points that participants have talked of: security concerns related to when it comes to open source, or the lack of internal skill sets. I feel like that's a definite big area that a lot of enterprises are struggling with. Open source skill sets are rare and few. There aren't too many. So training them and getting them ramped up quickly gets tough, and obviously it's understandable. But that's why also I feel like working with open source providers, it's a faster way to turn around and go to market or go live, as soon as you have a time frame in mind. Likewise, I think the survey also talks of how today product vendors support is not as as gripped. So there's a lack there. And I guess that's another thing for product vendors itself. When I'm saying product vendors, I'm talking about, enterprise open source providers, right? So I think for them, the lack of support or lack of regional presence sometimes is a very commonly experienced challenge. And I think that's one area where they can look at and improvise, again, through having the relevant partners here, or, either ways it works the way they see deem fit, of course, but that's an area that the people have voted for, where they see there's a challenge that they face. And of course, the last one is compliance requirement from regulating bodies. So these are some of the top challenges that the people have voted for when they feel like, where they get stuck when it comes to adopting open source quickly.
You just mentioned that lack of internal skill sets is a major parameter. I mean, keeping that in mind, do you see these key stakeholders working with open source providers going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it has already begun. Of course, we have a lot of customers who come to us for, open source support and services. And of course, we do the whole range of, whether, with consulting to, migration, it's technical services, managed services, at Ashnik, we do all of that. In the survey as well, there is one statistic which is very interesting, and where organizations were asked as to, if you want to work with open source providers, what is it that you want to work with them for? What is it the driving force is? And almost 52% of the people said it was the familiarity with open source and getting the guidance on the right fit tools and technologies being one of the top reasons why they want to work with providers like us. And I guess that makes a lot of sense, because I get it. You are able to take things, faster and able to amp up faster, because, you have a sort of seasoned professional who's been in the business, knows open source in and out, and can help you. So working with providers today has become a very common, phenomenon, and we are seeing that increasingly in most of our regions, actually, right? And one of the other reasons why they also want to work with providers like us is for better support, which I think they feel sometimes they may lack from product vendors, but they get it from service providers. So there's more 24/7 support. I mean, there are systems in place to be able to provide that for customers. And that is, another driving force as well. All that, of course, when you put together, lack of skills internally is what the third thing that they have, 23% people voted for that. I guess that just comes from the fact that you save time on hiring and, training your people, but you directly want to work with someone who's knowing the job and has done it really well for a good considerable amount of time, and our industry veterans in that regard. So, that's probably the reason why third point was something like that for them. So picking up lack of internal skills internally.
DEEPTI, as we know, open source databases have been highly used for quite some time now. I would say it's in fact in the past 2 decades they have been in the know-how of people who are in the open source domain. So has this survey covered anything related to open source databases and their impact in 2023 and beyond?
Oh yes, certainly we have. So we definitely, there were a few questions which were aimed at getting database insights, because like you rightly said, open source is today extremely used in the database category. There are a lot of migration which is happening from legacy systems to open source systems, just because it's more scalable, it's more agile, and it's more future driven basically. So one of the statistics showed very interestingly that the cloud-based database will see an increased usage in the coming year. Very closely followed by relational database such as Postgres and others. 23% in fact said distributed SQL, and 22% picked no SQL databases. So they're all very close if you look at the numbers, which just goes on to show that database itself across is very heavily going to be backed by open source, at least for the year and the next, from where we see.
Okay.
And if you look at the reasons why people are choosing to migrate to open source, that's also one of the things that the survey was reflective of. Participants picked some of the very key goals, which was in their order of importance or order of preference. cost efficiency was at number one. Over 50% of the people said that they choose open source database for better cost efficiency, followed by wanting to implement a new age technology. So Postgres database, which is of course, has been one of the most well-known open source databases, and has been is also being used by some of the very top enterprises today in Asia. We sort of wanted to know from our participants as to what are the key factors, that they would want in Postgres. If they had to address something they see as a challenge or as not an issue, I can't say it's a challenge or an issue, but if they would like to better their Postgres in some sense, and how or what would it be? So there were some interesting answers, that we looked at, starting from automation for deployment, management, and monitoring of Postgres. This was interesting to see. A lot of people, a lot of enterprises today feel like this is an area where they need help, or they could do better on the Postgres front, right? Then the cost of commercial Postgres is obviously the enterprise Postgres. The cost which is climbing as opposed to, of course, your open source Postgres. That was one of the concerns that, was put forward. And lack of in-house Postgres skills. We do come back to skills very often because obviously this is so skill set based. So, same thing with Postgres skills. Lack of in-house Postgres was one thing that was mentioned. And the lack of support from third-party vendors. This is another thing that also came up, which was interesting to observe.
Okay. That gives some perspectives for our viewers on open source databases and their impact going forward. So we are talking of databases, and that obviously means the data, the valuable data in the databases. So when it comes to data, do you foresee any kind of challenges that businesses may or may not face when it comes to deriving, let's say, real-time insights from those data?
Interesting question. Yes, in fact, real-time insights is so critical today, right? We are able to, for enterprises, they're able to sort of draw quicker actions based on the insights they're deriving, and fix issues, better their CX, and so many other things, which is why it's very important and on radar for a lot of customers. Couple of things that obviously help you achieve that is streaming data pipeline, for example, right, which is a high-speed data pipeline. And we did the survey does touch upon this actually briefly, where we asked our participants to put together what are the challenges that they face when it comes to building a data pipeline and deriving real-time insights typically that they see in their own industry or in their enterprise. And there was a good mixed bag of answers, starting with the key thing that everybody pointed out was the increased complexity in building data pipeline because of this, just the usage of so many technologies. You're bringing together a lot of technologies, and that sort of increases complexity. That was one thing that was pointed out, followed by lack of internal skill sets in order to do that, right? Which is why they do prefer to work with service providers, so that they are able to tackle that issue, and they are able to not wait to train and hire and things like that. A lot of enterprises, even from what I see and talk to people, I understand that there's a lot of uncertainty in the sense of what is the ROI when they get started on their data pipeline journey, and I guess somewhere in the middle they may have a tentative idea, but at the beginning they really don't know how to derive it, and that's something that even our participants have sort of put together, sort of have put out. And the last point some people have also brought to our notice is that they need relatively higher budgets. So that's so tackleable if you're using the right technologies and tools, honestly speaking. But this is the common challenges that organizations are seeing today or facing in this space.
Right, Deepti. Now, you mentioned somewhere in this conversation ROI. Keeping the ROI perspective in mind, would you like to highlight any important initiative for our viewers here, wherein implementing that particular initiative would help them in the ROI aspect? And are there any particular tools for that?
I mean, there are several, but today, from what I understand in the industry, and just sort of talking to customers, uh, what's really important to a lot of enterprise customers is achieving unified observability. And that is a very critical initiative. And it is going to be a critical initiative for the next 1 or 2 years for everyone, to get in tandem. There are a lot of people on, I mean, the whole curve of adoption is different. A lot of people are already, started their journey of unified observability. Some of them are just starting out. And for all those enterprises, there are certainly challenges that they face. And we had asked this question in the survey as well, right? By the way, to answer your question, unified observability was also unanimously voted as an important initiative across from all the participants, which means it's really hot and right on top at this point. And the key challenges most of them put out towards us was complexities owing to infrastructure sprawl and microservices, right? And the sheer lack of a unified tool. I guess, you can do it in parts, but when you stitch it together and be able to sort of the ability to have a complete view, I think that sort of, was a missing aspect and was a challenge that was clearly seen by our participants. Then the second answer that a lot of got a lot of votes was lack of clarity on observability goals. So they start off, but there is no derivative of where it needs to go or what we need to achieve or where we need to end at. It wouldn't be ROI, but the lack of clarity is certainly there, and that was something that was pointed out. And again, the last point was unavailability of the right skill sets and resources. So I know we keep seeing the skill set part, but again, like I said, open source skill sets are extremely hot at the moment, and there aren't too many people doing this, well. But my suggestion or my recommendation to enterprises is, don't wait to hire, train, coach. Just work with the right providers, vendors. There are a lot of them in the market today who are able to help you get on this journey much quickly and without that downtime, and as error free as possible. You can't call anything error free, but as close to that as possible.
With regards to the very same point of unified observability, which you mentioned that was unanimously voted as a preferred initiative in the survey, are there any tools also which are there for observability that the participants may have
So
voted
many
in the...
tools. Absolutely, so many tools. Um, for monitoring, the top observability tools, in fact, it is, you will see it in the survey as well. ELK was the most preferred observability tool for monitoring, and that got 40% of the participants picked ELK. 36% picked Prometheus Loki, and the rest 25 picked a mixed bag of Grafana, Datadog, Splunk, New Relic, and others. So these are all the top tools today in the market which you can use for observability.
So DEEPTI, at the very beginning of our conversation, you mentioned something about adoption of open source, which I believe is also one of the key objectives, along with the other objectives for this for conducting this open source survey. So, would you like to mention any specific structure or process for our viewers here for a seamless adoption of open source?
So there is not one structure or one anything that's sort of stateable, but there is this a lot of organizations today. In fact, even in the survey, if you look at the survey, you'll see that about 49% of the organizations today state that an OSPO, it's called an OSPO, which is an open source program office, will be implemented to encourage a structured adoption of open source in the coming years. And this becomes extremely amazing to look at, because this was not something that was on the radar, say a few years down the line. But the whole point of this coming up in the survey itself is indicative that how important, one, open source is to enterprises, and B, how how they want to structure it and make it more enterprise driven, with the right with the right teams and the right budgets assigned to it. So I guess that was something that was very interesting to look at, because a lot of them, the 49% is a big number, and they said it will be, implemented, and 20% or in fact said that it's already implemented. So that's also very encouraging as a number to know of.
Really, these are some very big numbers we are talking about when we speak about open source adoption, particularly.
In fact, interestingly, the survey also forecasted that 86% of enterprises said that their organization's budget for open source technologies will increase in 23-24. And that was promising. I mean, that is promising, rather, because the number split was very interesting within it as well. From the 86%, 56 said that they are looking at an increase of over 50% of the current budgets that is given to open source at this point. And 30% said it will increase by up to 25%. So, these are just numbers and statistics, but they, of course, talk very closely to what we are all working towards, the goal of open source itself, which is being accessible to a lot of enterprises and it making a difference to enterprises. And I think that feels like a wonderful, insight into open source. And these numbers itself talk of, where open source is headed, right? Mainly upward.
Right, right. Yes, definitely. That's the way we foresee open source to go. Now, finally, we arrive at the very last question of this episode. What are some of the key takeaways from this survey, from this talk, from this discussion that we are having, that you would want the various organizations and decision makers to take away and consider for their business?
I think one of the most important takeaways from the surveys itself is the significance of having a well-defined open source strategy within organizations. That came out across very, very prominently and strongly, followed by real-time data management, right? Whether it's database platform, it's analytics, it's unified observability, it's data pipeline. Being able to manage data, efficiently, I think open source today is playing an extremely important role there. Then comes, the other thing that I would like to highlight here is how open source service providers like Ashnik, for example, and others in the industry, how their position is today. I mean, there's such a critical piece, fitment piece in the puzzle, so to say, for organizations. They're building a lot of applications, infrastructure needs, and want to work with them is growing, because of the skill set issues and things like that. This survey also summarizes some very interesting statistics on, how open source service providers are important today. They're the missing link in the puzzle in order to get things rolling quickly and go live quickly, right? Especially when it comes to, instead of really hiring in-house teams and upskilling them, which is also, of course, very important, which is very, the need of the hour. But if, you're not able to do that at breakneck speed, then you work with service providers. And that's something that survey was reflective of, right? And the ability or the need to choose the right vendors. Some of the key aspects which we also saw is how AI ML is so reliant on open source technologies, right? Which is very interesting to, understand. And, it's not just AI ML, but rather a lot of emerging initiatives and trends today, which is all sort of backed by open source, in order to keep the business moat going, right? The last point, I think, in summary, would be, the budget part. When you looked at the increase that's going to be, happening in 2023 and 24, it just showed that how there's a clear pathway for open source, which is paved out for enterprises. They're aware of what they want to do and where they want to take it, right? And which is why they're also implementing the OSPO, which is the Open Source Program Office, and things like that. So I guess the path ahead for open source is very, very defined, so to say, which was not the case some time back. And I think that's a very valuable observation that we derive from this survey.
Thank you, DIPTI, for helping us understand key perspectives and insights of open source and also for sharing your valuable time with our viewers today. It's evident that open source is and will continue to shape the future of technology, innovation, and digital transformation. We encourage our viewers to explore the full survey report on Ashnik's website for a more detailed analysis and thorough understanding. Would you like to add anything more for our audience, Dipti?
I think we've covered a lot through our talk, Rituraj, and you also sort of talked of what is it that the audience can look at through the survey. There is nothing more to add, but so if any of you viewers have any further questions or queries on open source, on the open source survey, or even otherwise, please feel free to reach out to us at success@ashnik.com, or you can also visit our website www.ashnik.com. So talk to us, and we'll be happy to deliver the solutions that you're looking for the open source way.
Right. Thank you once again, Dipti. With that, it's a wrap for this time, folks. We hope you found this discussion informative, fruitful, and gained some groundbreaking insights. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more such exciting content on what? Obviously, on open source. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay tuned and keep exploring the exciting world of open source. Thank you.